Caught my husband's mother sneaking weird photos of me nursing our baby, and now she's blaming me for ruining her shots. My name is Emily, I'm 37, and my family and I have been staying with my husband's parents for about a week now. We've got another week to go before we have to get the kids ready for back to school. To set the scene, my mother-in-law and I have never exactly gotten along. There's always been tension. Lately, though, she seemed to be trying to play nice since I gave birth to our fourth child, a baby boy, just 4 months old. I thought maybe we had finally settled into a truce. But apparently, that illusion was only ever paper thin. The minute we arrived at their house, she started stirring the pot and pushing all my buttons. She's been rummaging through my clothes, whining about how I should bottle feed instead of nursing, so she could have a chance to feed her baby, and generally doing the works, right down to passive-aggressive sighs and eye rolls whenever I do something she disapproves of. I've tried to keep biting my tongue for my husband's sake because he truly loves his family and this is one of the few times we get to spend with his siblings. But that facade came to a crashing end by the end of the week. Mill stormed down the stairs while we were having breakfast. The kids were out in the yard, and she was marching toward me with that look. Immediately, I started mentally scrolling through her endless list of household rules, trying to figure out which one I'd broken, or what trigger I'd pulled this time. She slammed her phone down on the counter and scrolled through a gallery of photos. Only, these weren't just any photos. They were all of me and the baby, photos she took when I wasn't paying attention. Most are blurry or shot from bizarre angles, like she hid her phone in her lap and angled it upward. There's even one taken through a crack in the door to the bedroom my husband and I are staying in. I looked at her and tried to keep my cool, but I demanded to know what she thought she was doing, why she was acting like some kind of lunatic, sneaking around to take pictures instead of just asking for help getting the shots she wanted. I don't want my infant son's face plastered all over the internet, so in my Facebook pictures, I always cover his face with emojis. I would have happily helped her get some nice photos she could actually use. But that wasn't enough for her. She scoffed that she didn't want to use those stupid pictures with emojis all over his face, and whined about how I never put him down, so she couldn't get a photo of him by himself, which honestly, yes, I wear him most of the day or he's contact napping. To her, that just meant I was ruining her chance at photos. To top it off, she started sniping about how she couldn't post these pictures because I'm huge and ruining them by looking ridiculous. For reference, I'm 5 feet 3 inches and 230 pounds, and these photos she took are all at warped, low angles, which of course make me look bigger, double chin and all, baby pretty much just a head or a limb pressed against me. I told her, very clearly, that I was not going to tolerate this behavior. Since she decided to ambush me like this instead of having a real conversation, she could just work with what she already had. She would not be getting a solo photo op with my baby now. My husband totally has my back on this. He's been stepping in to block her when she tries to sneak more photos, and sometimes distracting her so I can safely leave the room with the baby. But despite that, the rest of the family has been acting as if I'm the crazy one. My Phil insists that she has a right to take photos of her grandchild, and that it's not her fault I'm so insecure about how fat I am. My husband's twin sister just waves me off, saying, she's always been catty about weight, why are you acting so insulted like it's the first time? Even my own sister, when I call to vent, shrugs it off, she was like this 60 pounds ago, why is it suddenly a big deal again? No one seems to hear me when I insist. I don't care about Mill's comments on my weight. I care about the fact that she is sneaking around, taking pictures of my baby without permission, refusing to respect my boundaries. She doesn't want to follow my rules about covering his face. She knows she can't just pry him out of my arms, so she's resorting to acting like a stalker instead. It's gotten to the point that one of these photos she took is of me nursing my son. How does she not see how inappropriate and deeply weird this is? Am I the crazy one? Because I feel like this crossed so many lines, and no one around me seems to care. Update 1. After my husband came back to his parents' house without me or our baby, I could almost feel the tension simmering from miles away. His mother huffed and launched into her usual grumbling, accusing me of being dramatic and overly possessive of her baby. She muttered that I was ruining the trip for everyone. My sister-in-law was quick to jump in, winding my mother-in-law up by insisting I didn't want anyone else to build a relationship with the baby. My husband, thankfully, wasn't having any of it. He told both of them to mind their business and get a grip, pointing out to my mother-in-law that he needed to have a serious talk with her once our kids went out for lunch with my brother-in-law. She rolled her eyes at him and walked away, but he wasn't about to let it go. When they sat down for their talk, my husband stood his ground with his mother and father. He told them they couldn't just expect me to give in and let them stomp all over my boundaries just because they wanted unrestricted access to our baby. He made it clear, we are the final say in what happens with our children, and if they couldn't get on board, they could forget about seeing the kids at all, especially not unsupervised. He called out my mother-in-law's scheming, sneaking around and acting like my word meant nothing, and told her it was childish and proved she wasn't trustworthy. He also warned both of them to keep their opinions about my weight to themselves. That set off what my husband later told me was a practically 2 to 3 hour argument, only interrupted because my brother-in-law came back with the kids and my husband refused to argue in front of them. I heard all about my mother-in-law's crocodile tears, how she kept asking why my husband wouldn't defend her, insisting I was trying to ruin their relationship, he has never been close to her, by the way, and whining about just wanting to show off her baby to her friends and the extended family. My husband shot back that if she really wanted pictures, all she had to do was ask for help and he or I could cover the baby's face. She and my father-in-law insisted they shouldn't have to ask permission, that they were grown adults and could do as they please in their own home. My husband reminded them that this was our baby, not theirs, and that's exactly why I had removed myself from the situation. He added that if they wanted to see our baby, they could do so at our house, on our terms. This turned into a loud back and forth until my brother-in-law's return. For the rest of the day, my mother-in-law grumbled under her breath and practically ignored our older children, even as my 5-year-old was desperately trying to get her attention. My husband just let it go, choosing instead to spend the evening playing board games with the kids and his brother while his mother and sister sulked in the kitchen. That night, with the kids asleep and my father-in-law already in bed, my husband kicked back with a beer alongside his brother while my mother-in-law and sister-in-law had wine in the kitchen. Then my husband began to hear the two of them giggling, and while checking his phone, he noticed something that made his blood boil. My mother-in-law had posted all the photos she'd snuck of me on her Facebook page, captioning them, "My name, won't let me see my grandson, so you'll have to excuse her hogging the frame." The comments were somehow even worse. Her sisters were making derogatory remarks about my hair, "I'm a natural redhead, thank you very much," shaming me for my selfishness, and of course, my body. That was it, my husband absolutely lost it. He demanded that my mother-in-law take the photos down or he'd do it himself. Turned out, there were even more photos than the ones he'd found at first, including several where my nursing bra is unclipped, my top wide open, as I fed my baby. My mother-in-law tried to brush it off, teasing that she thought he wasn't ashamed of being married to a fat woman. He wasn't having any of it. My husband stormed into the kitchen, and after a brief scuffle, snatched my mother-in-law's phone right out of her hands. He deleted every photo from Facebook and then from her phone entirely, before slamming her phone back down on the counter and telling her that he'd be leaving first thing in the morning. My mother-in-law scowled, shouting that it wasn't fair he was taking my side. He told her point blank, "He loves me, and it's not my side versus hers, it's our side versus hers." At the time, I was completely unaware of any of this. I was busy cleaning, looking after the baby, and fighting off a cold I'd seemingly been incubating since the first week of our visit. Out of nowhere, I get a call from my husband. He's in his car, trying to get himself together, saying he and the kids would be home in the morning, and that we needed to make some decisions about how to handle the in-laws moving forward. He explained everything. I stayed calm for his sake and reassured him, and eventually, we both managed to get some sleep. The next morning, I got up early with the baby and made coffee and breakfast. My husband walked in with the kids, 14, 10, and 5, at about 6 a.m. we ate together, then the girls went off to their friends' houses, and my 5-year-old disappeared into the basement den to watch cartoons. My husband and I sat down and talked things through. He told me he was done with the annual visits to his parents' place, that from now on, he'd see his brother one-on-one a couple of times a year instead. We mapped out stricter boundaries. The kids would no longer go to the in-laws' house, and if his parents wanted to visit us, our house, our rules. If they acted out, they would be asked to leave. My mother-in-law has been blowing up his phone ever since he left, but he's ignoring her for now and helping me around the house. And, almost shyly, he admitted that as disturbing and infuriating as those creepy photos were, they'd given him a new appreciation for my round face. I really picked a winner, didn't I? Update 2. We made it exactly 3 days before the next shoe dropped. I was in the den with the baby dozing on my chest, Bluey murmuring in the background for my 5-year-old, when someone knocked like they were trying to rap the paint off the front door. I grabbed the monitor, tucked the baby into the carrier, and opened it to 2 people with badges and polite faces. "Hi, ma'am. We're with Child Protective Services. We got a report and need to do a welfare check." Everything inside of me went hot and then very, very cold. I stepped back and let them in. My husband appeared out of nowhere. He'd been folding laundry in the hall, and looked from their badges to me. The older one explained they'd received a report that we were refusing to let anyone else touch or hold the infant, that I was co-sleeping unsafely, exclusively wearing the baby all day and night, and that there were hygiene issues. They said concern for postpartum mental health like it was a phrase they read off a card. I heard my 5-year-old whisper, "Are they police?" And my husband told him they were helpers, then took him to the kitchen to get him a juice. I showed the bassinet beside our bed with a fitted sheet and nothing else, the pack and play in the living room, the drawer of diapers and wipes stacked like tiny bricks. I walked them through the fridge and the little basket with the bottles for expressed milk. The baby snuffled against my shirt and did that soft sleepy laugh, and the younger caseworker's face softened for a second before she remembered she was supposed to be neutral. They asked to see the other kids, so our teenagers came out, sleepy-haired and annoyed. Our 14-year-old blinked and said, "We're fine. We're going to the pool later," like they were the ones being inconvenienced. They asked both girls if they felt safe at home, whether anyone was hurting them. Both of them said no. Our 10-year-old said, "My mom just makes everyone wash their hands," like she thought that would help. I handed over the baby because they asked to check his weight bearing and skin. He was clean, fat-thighed, a little milk-drunk and perfectly content to hang out with whoever was warm. The older caseworker looked at the notes on his clipboard, looked at the baby's double chin, and then looked at me. "Do you have any idea who would have made this report?" He asked carefully. An anonymous grandmother who was just told she can't post photos of him on Facebook, I said. We have history. My husband, who had been dead silent, walked back in with a folder. He had been waiting for this in a way that made me want to cry and kiss him and scream all at once. He'd already printed the screenshots from the night he deleted the photos off his mother's page. He had a timestamped text thread where she doubled down on her baby. He had the picture where you can see the doorframe in the foreground and my nursing bra unclipped because she'd shot through the crack in the bedroom door. He set them on the coffee table and slid them forward with one finger. They were both very professional. They examined everything. They asked if either of us had been diagnosed with postpartum depression or anxiety and if we had support. I told them I had my 6-week check and my doctor was happy with me, and that we had a pediatrician appointment scheduled next week. I asked if I could nurse while we talked and the younger one nodded so fast her ponytail bobbed. When they were done, the older one thanked us for our time and apologized in that careful, practiced way government workers do when they can't choose sides. I'm not supposed to disclose the source of a report, he said, but I can document this as likely retaliatory. If this continues, there's a process for addressing malicious reporting. He told us to keep saving everything and to call if anyone showed up at the house or at the kids' school. I held myself together until the door closed. Then I took the baby to the bedroom, sat on the floor against the bed, and Ugly cried while he worked his little jaw, oblivious. My husband sat beside me and rested his forehead against my shoulder. I'm calling an attorney, he said into my shirt. It took him 2 hours to get someone to pick up, but a friend of a friend recommended a family lawyer who called back on his lunch break. We explained everything. He immediately told us to send a cease and desist to his mother regarding the dissemination of private images and to put her on notice about harassment. He also told us to make a non-emergency police report about the photos taken through the bedroom door. Depending on your state, that can fall under voyeurism, he said. At the very least, it's a paper trail. While we were waiting for him to draft the letter, my husband texted his brother to ask point-blank if his mother had made the report. There was a long pause. Then a bubble. Then nothing. 10 minutes later, we got a screenshot of a group chat I didn't know existed. His mother, his sister, his aunt, and 2 cousins. His mother had typed, "Maybe the state can teach her boundaries since she won't listen to family." His sister sent a string of laughing emojis. His aunt wrote, "They can't take a baby if the mom feeds him, dear," and then, "Just say you're concerned." It's anonymous. I didn't know whether to thank the aunt for being the only one with a brain cell in that entire thread or throw up. My husband said nothing for a full minute, then typed, "We're done," and left the chat. He blocked his sister right then and there. The cease and desist went out by email by 3 that afternoon and by certified mail the next morning. We made the police report. The officer who took it was a woman with tired eyes who looked like she'd seen everything and then some. We told her about the photos at the door, about the Facebook post, about the CPS visit. She whistled when she saw the nursing photo. "You were in a bedroom with the door closed?" she asked. "She took this through a crack?" "Yes," I said. "That's enough for me to call her and put the fear of God in," she said, and opened her little notebook. We didn't have to wait long. At 5:30, we got a voicemail from my mother-in-law, starting in her pinched customer service tone and spiraling. "How could you do this to me?" A police officer called me at work. At work. I was mortified. "How dare you make me sound like some kind of pervert when all I wanted were pictures of my grandson? You'll regret humiliating me like this. You are destroying this family." It went on like that for 2 solid minutes, with a detour into how her boss was already on her about attendance issues and she didn't need this drama. Somewhere in the middle she insisted she didn't call CPS. At the very end, she sniffed and said, "You know what? Forget it. I'll just wait until he's older and can tell me he wants to come over." We didn't respond. My husband set his phone down like it was radioactive and went to grill chicken in the rain. The next morning, a padded envelope arrived addressed to our 5-year-old in colorful, looping grandma handwriting. I opened it because we'd already agreed we were screening everything. Inside was a Shutterfly photo book with a linen cover and Nana's Cuddles embossed in gold on the front. I didn't realize my hand was shaking until I left a smeared thumbprint on the title page. She'd made it before my husband deleted the Facebook post. Every creepy, sneaky shot was there, printed on nice paper, arranged with little captions in cursive. "Morning snuggles." Under a picture where my tank top is pulled down and the curve of my breast is clearly visible as the baby latches. Never puts him down. Under a photo so low angle it looked like a distorted funhouse version of me. Finally asleep. Under the one shot through the bedroom door. There were little flower stickers on the corners. My husband took the book like it was a bomb. He flipped through it in silence, then put it back in the envelope and sealed it with tape. "This goes with the evidence," he said. He drove it straight to the police station and asked to add it to our existing report. The same officer came out, looked through it, and her mouth went flat. "Okay," she said. "Now it's not just a phone. She had to upload, arrange, order, and pay for this. This is deliberate." She made a copy of our cease and desist to attach to our file and told my husband she had already left his mother a message explaining the legal definition of harassment and the part where continued distribution of images taken in a place where there is an expectation of privacy can become a criminal matter. "I can't promise charges," she said, "but I can promise she won't enjoy the next conversation." That evening, my father-in-law called from an unknown number and asked to speak to my husband alone. They went out on the porch. I stood at the window and watched my husband lean against the railing with his arms crossed tight, the lined-up herb pots bumping his hip. I couldn't hear everything, but a few sentences came through. My father-in-law said, "I didn't know she was doing that, I swear." He said, "She's drinking more," and then, softer, "She's not well." He said, "I can come without her, and I'll go to counseling with her if that's what it takes." My husband listened, and for the first time in days, his face went from hard to tired. When he came back in, he sat on the edge of the couch and rubbed both hands down his face. "He says he'll see us by himself," he said. "He says he's sorry, he didn't make any promises back." I told him we're not speaking to her. I told him if he comes, it's to our house, and if he brings her, the door doesn't open. As if the universe wanted to underline his point, she showed up the next morning anyway. She marched up our walkway with my sister-in-law 2 steps behind her, sunglasses on like she was trying to avoid being recognized. The ring caught every second. She tried the door like we were a 7-Eleven. When it didn't open, she leaned into the camera and said in that sugar-poisoned voice, "I came to apologize in person. Let me in." My husband pressed the speaker button from the kitchen. "No," he said. "You have been told not to come here." She laughed, sharp and tinny. "Don't be ridiculous. Just let me hold my grandson for a minute." "Leave," he said, and you could hear the control in his voice, the way he set each word down like a brick. "Or I will call the police." She turned to my sister-in-law and said, "He's serious," like that was a hilarious joke. Then she yanked the storm door and it thunked against the lock. The baby startled on my shoulder and hiccuped once. My husband dialed with his eyes on the screen. They didn't wait for the officer to arrive. They got in their car and peeled out of our driveway like teenagers. After the house went quiet, my 5-year-old tugged my sleeve. "Grandma told me a secret at their house," he said, like he'd been keeping it trapped behind his teeth. "She said if I take pictures of the baby when you're sleeping, I could have cookies." It felt like someone poured sand into my veins. I hugged him and told him we don't keep secrets in our family, and that no one asks him to do sneaky things like that ever again. He nodded and said, "Okay," and then asked if he could have a popsicle. Kids are resilient in a way that hurts. We are, for better or worse, on the other side of some line. The lawyer sent a second letter after the porch visit, this one with bolder language. The officer called to say she spoke to my mother-in-law, who cried and then yelled and then cried again and insisted we were blowing this out of proportion. My father-in-law texted to ask if he could come by next week and bring lasagna. My husband said yes, and that he'd meet him on the driveway first. Tonight, after dinner, he asked if I wanted to take a walk. We put the baby in the carrier, our son on his scooter, and wandered down to the little park at the end of our street. The sun was low and syrupy. A neighbor we know from school pickup waved, then jogged over with her DSLR swinging from her neck. "You two look like a postcard," she said, then asked if she could snap a couple of shots and text them to me. We stood in the ridiculous golden light, my husband's hand on my hip, our son doing circles around a tree, the baby drooling on my collarbone, and let her take 3 pictures. When she sent them, I put a little sunflower over the baby's face and printed one for our hallway. Later, my husband pointed at the photo and said, "This is how our life looks. Our way. We're not going back. Not to that house, not to that dynamic, not to that idea that family means swallowing anything to keep the peace." I never wanted a war, but if she wanted to make this a battlefield, she picked 2 people who will not move when it comes to our children. I'm learning that boundaries are only as good as your willingness to enforce them. Turns out, I have more spine than I thought. And an excellent partner who apparently knows his way around a cease and desist. Update 3. The letter from CPS came in a thin white envelope that looked like a bill and felt like a verdict. Unfounded, stamped in a rectangle so neat it almost made me laugh. I put it in a plastic sleeve and slid it into the same folder where we've been keeping everything else, the paper trail with a pulse. I was making oatmeal when the doorbell went off, 1 ring, then 2, then the knock that says the person on the other side is paid to be ignored. The man on the step was polite and sunburned with a clipboard. "Are you Emily?" he asked, and when I said yes, he handed me a stack of papers with colored tabs sticking out like a porcupine. "You've been served." It was, on its face, absurd, a petition for grandparent visitation stapled to a declaration full of creative writing. My refusal to foster a meaningful bond had apparently caused substantial emotional distress. She'd underlined meaningful 3 times, as if that made it statutory. She'd thrown in a mention of mental health concerns about me, the kind of vague hand-waving that sounds ominous if you haven't watched someone Google their strategy at midnight with a glass of wine. I stood in the doorway with the baby drooling into the carrier, the papers getting heavier in my hands, and said out loud to no one, "She really walked herself to this cliff and swan dived." Our attorney called back while the coffee was still warm. He sounded almost chipper in that tightly controlled way that says someone's favorite sport is rules. He told us not to panic and that in our state, grandparents' rights look like Swiss cheese, and we were a whole block of cheddar. "We'll respond," he said. "And since we're already accumulating, let's file for a civil harassment order while we're at it." I asked him what that looked like in practice. "A judge telling her, in writing, to leave you alone," he said, "and if she can't, consequences." 48 hours later, The pediatrician's office called me back with that brisk, kind voice that makes you feel like you've done your homework. We had someone call for your son's immunization record, the nurse said. Identified herself as Grandma. We did not release anything, but I wanted to flag it. I sat down on the kitchen floor with the dog nosing my elbow and said, "Please put a password on our chart." She said, "Already did," and then, after a tiny pause, "Babies from litigious families get the strongest stickers." She meant security. She said it like a joke. I said, "Thank you anyway." Court came faster than I expected. We arranged childcare for the older kids and strapped the baby into a stroller in a collared onesie that made him look like a tiny office manager. Our courthouse is one of those old brick buildings with stairs that assume you carried your drama on foot. My husband held the diaper bag like a briefcase and kept his face very still. She was already in the hallway when we turned the corner, wearing a suit the color of frosting and pearls that made a noise when she moved. My sister-in-law hovered at her shoulder like a hyphen. My mother-in-law's eyes slid over the stroller, past my face, and landed on my husband, and she smiled in a way I've never seen on a human being outside of a pageant. "There's my son," she said, too bright, like she'd practiced for the echo. Our judge was a small woman with iron gray hair and the kind of glasses that tell you lying will be a bad use of your morning. She listened to both attorneys, read more than I thought she would, and then asked careful questions that were not the questions my mother-in-law wanted. "You took a photograph through a bedroom door?" she asked, not looking up from the exhibit. "Yes," my mother-in-law said, and her lawyer half rose from his chair and sat back down in the same movement. "Why?" the judge asked. "She wouldn't let me hold him," my mother-in-law said, and I watched the little muscle in the judge's jaw move exactly once. The Shutterfly book made an appearance like a bad actor's headshot. The ring footage played on the little court TV with the volume too low, mouths moving like fish. The CPS letter sat on top of the stack like a white flag. At one point, the judge asked if there had been any attempts to circumvent us by contacting the older children. My husband spoke for the first time. "Yes," he said. "Direct messages to our teen's account. We took screenshots." He slid them forward. My sister-in-law made a strangled noise that sounded like she bit her own tongue. When it was my turn to actually speak, my hand stayed steady on the stroller handle as if all of my adrenaline had gone into keeping that baby from rolling backwards. I said the truth in short sentences. We had boundaries. We explained them. She didn't respect them. It escalated. We acted. The judge let it sit, then leaned back a little and took off her glasses. "Ma'am," she said to my mother-in-law in a voice that would have made me volunteer for jury duty, "you do not get to terrorize your family and then ask this court to reward you for it." The grandparents' petition died on the vine, denied without prejudice but in a way that felt like a door shutting and locking from our side. On our petition, the judge granted a 1-year civil harassment order with specificity. No contact with me, my husband, or our children. No indirect contact through third parties. No publishing, distributing, or soliciting images of our children. No approaching our home, the kids' school, their activities. If you find yourself near their mailbox for any reason other than a wrong turn, the judge said, turn around. My mother-in-law's mouth did a fish thing. My sister-in-law whispered something and got elbowed gently by their attorney, who looked like he wished he were a houseplant. In the hallway after, my mother-in-law tried to glide toward the stroller. A bailiff materialized like a vending machine with a heartbeat and stood between us without raising his voice. My husband didn't say a word to her. He just adjusted the strap on the diaper bag and steered us toward the stairwell. We walked into the sun and the noise of traffic and I realized my shoulders were down for the first time in weeks. That evening my father-in-law came by with a lasagna, like he promised. He parked at the curb and waited, hands on the steering wheel, until my husband went out and waved him up the driveway. He didn't bring it in. He set it on the porch, still hot under the foil, and stayed standing there, shifting his weight the way people do when they're about to confess or ask for permission. "I'm staying with my brother for a bit," he said quietly, eyes on the concrete. She's not hearing anyone. HR put her on leave. They told her to call the employee assistance number. I don't know what she'll do with that. He looked older than he had any right to. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know it doesn't undo anything." He pulled an envelope out of his jacket like a magic trick. "I found this on the family computer in a downloads folder. I thought you should have it." Inside were screenshots I didn't know I was bracing for, drafts of captions for the book with little notes to herself, "Find one where he's alone?" and a post composed to a private Facebook group, never posted, titled, "How do I get a stubborn dill to let me have my rights?" My husband scanned the pages, nodded once, and slid them back into the folder. "Thank you," he said. "You can come by next week," he added, and my father-in-law let out a breath like a tire leak. 2 days after the order, the pediatrician's office called again. "Just letting you know we had another attempted call," the nurse said, dry as toast. "They didn't pass the password challenge. It was performative." I said, "Thank you for the heads up." She said, "He's due for his 4-month shots. Bring your little office manager in. We'll make him cry and then give him a sticker." I laughed for the first time in a way that didn't feel like an accident. There have been small ripple effects in ways I couldn't have planned. Our 14-year-old handed me her phone and said, "And Elle messaged me again but I didn't answer." It was 3 dots of bait. We added the screenshot to the folder. Our 5-year-old brought home a drawing from camp of our family, 5 big lollipop heads and a baby shaped like a potato with legs. In the corner, the teacher had written, "We don't keep secrets." Great job. And I went into the pantry and cried between the cereal and the pasta for as long as it took to be able to open the door again without scaring anybody. On a Thursday, the neighbor with the camera knocked again, this time with a little stack of prints in a paper envelope like it was 1999. "These came out so good," she said. "I made extras." My husband slid one out and there we were, golden light, a face-shaped sunflower over the baby, our son in blur motion, my hair a copper flag, my husband's hand curved around my waist in a way that felt like a sentence in another language I still understood. He taped it to the fridge next to the spelling test and the picture of a stegosaurus. The copy for his dad went into an envelope with our return address on the corner. Tonight, my husband grilled pork chops in weather that couldn't decide between thunder or mercy while I sat on the living room rug and reminded the baby that rolling from belly to back was not, in fact, an Olympic sport. He considered physics, breathed with his whole body, and then flopped over triumphantly and startled himself into one of those gummy, whole-face grins that don't belong to any other species. My husband walked in with rain on his shoulders and said, "Do it again, show off." Our 5-year-old ran in to narrate it like a sportscaster. Our teens rolled their eyes and watched from the doorway. It was so ordinary I wanted to frame it. We put the order in a sleeve and magneted it to the side of the fridge, not as a shrine, but as a boundary you can see from the hallway. My husband looked at it and then at me. "I keep thinking about that judge," he said. "The way she said turn around." He kissed my temple. "If she ever forgets," he said, "it's right there." The baby gummed my shoulder like he was writing his name. "I'm tired. I am less afraid. Our life is exactly where it belongs, inside our walls, on our terms, in a frame I picked because it matched the funny plant I can't keep alive. We're not going back. We don't have to. The paper says so. The people do, too."